Okay. I think if we could make a start, that would be great, please. Thank you. So everyone, if you could take a seat, that would be lovely. And I'd just like to welcome everybody to the first meeting of Health Scrutiny Committee for this municipal year. There are some new faces around the table, including mine. So I just wondered if perhaps before we start the meeting officially, if we could just very briefly say our names and so we can learn who we are, and maybe as members where we represent, that'd be really useful. So could we start with you perhaps?
I'm Councillor Dr.
Thank you.
Councillor Simon Thomas, Flixton Ward.
David Acton, Gores Hill Ward.
I'm Karen Barclay, I'm Bowden Ward.
I'm Sophie Taylor, I'm from Clifford Ward.
Just in time. If you could just introduce yourself, just say where you're from and your name, where you're from, so everyone knows. Thank you.
Put your microphone on, yeah.
Akila Akinola from Clifford.
Thank you.
I'm Ben Hartley, Councillor Ben Hartley from Ashton Mersey Ward.
Okay, well, thank you everybody and welcome to this evening's meeting, and thank you very much for attending. Okay, so just before we go through the agenda, just to make you aware that this meeting is being webcast. So if you just make sure that you're aware of that as we go through the agenda. I think with that, I think we can probably start our agenda proper with notice of apologies for tonight.
Thank you, Chair. We received apologies from Councillors Western and Haddad.
Okay, thank you. Any other apologies required? No. Okay, thank you. Okay, so item 2 on the agenda is Chairman and Vice Chairman of the committee, and perhaps we could note the appointment of myself as Chair and Councillor Taylor as Vice Chair for this municipal year. Happy to note that. Yeah, thank you. And item number 3 is membership of the committee. And please could we note the membership of the committee for the municipal year 2019-2020, which was decided at council on the 22nd of May. Thank you. Okay. And item number 4 is terms of reference, which we've had in our papers. And it's really just to note the terms of reference for the committee for this municipal year. Everyone happy with that? Thank you. Okay. Questions from the public, agenda item number 5. We haven't had any questions on this occasion, so none for today. Item number 6 is the minutes, and we need to have a proposer and seconder for the minutes that we've received them and that we agree they are a correct record. Obviously, it's people who are at the last meeting we need as either proposer or seconder. So may I have a proposer for those minutes?
I'll propose them that they are
thank you.
True and accurate record of what we discussed on that day.
Thank you, Councillor Taylor. May I have a seconder from anybody who was there at the meeting? Thank you, Councillor Acton. So those are proposed and seconded as an accurate record. Thank you. Agenda item number 7 is declarations of interest. Ask members to declare any interest they have in the items on tonight's agenda. Thank you. Anybody else? Dr. Serena Carr?
Could I declare an interest? As an employee of the NHS.
And Councillor Taylor?
The same. Can I declare an interest as an employee of the NHS?
Okay. So thank you very much for that.
Sorry, Councillor Lloyd.
Oh yes. Oh, sorry, Councillor Lloyd. Yes.
Sorry, just that some of the papers that come to here tonight that I was involved in last year. I'm just declaring that.
Okay. Thank you for that.
Hello, can I declare an interest as well? I'm Richard Spring. I'm Managing Director of the Community Services. So I'm part of Diane's team talking about the detox, but I'm also trustee at 42nd Street in Manchester. So just in case it comes up whilst I'm here.
Okay, thank you very much for that. Thank you. Thank you, one and all. Okay. Agenda item number 8 is urgent business, if there is any, which there is none this evening. Okay. So please can we move to agenda item number 9? It's the single hospital service update. We don't have anyone presenting this evening, but I don't know if members would like to make any comments on the report. We're asked to note the current position of the single hospital service programme. Anyone would like to make any comments on that? Councillor Acton.
It does say on 3.3 on page 15, and it talks about the benefits of the mergers, and that we will be getting some kind of report on that at some point, but I don't know when, because I think obviously what we want to be able to see at the end of all these mergers is that it is a benefit to the patients, and we want the evidence for that. So it's really just to make that point, and I wonder if anybody knows when that's likely to happen.
Okay, so will we be able to send this question to the service? That's brilliant. Okay, are there any other questions members would like to raise about the report? Yes, Dr. Councillor Akinola.
Can I ask, is this the length of the report normally, or is this just because it's a special report because it was done in 2007? Just seems 2017. Sorry, it seems it's out of date. Really, a lot of the stuff that's in it.
Which page are you looking at?
Oh, there's so many bits scribbled all over it.
We're on page 15, and it's a single hospital service update.
Well, am I getting a bit mixed up? No, all these.
Item 9.
Yes.
Oh, it's just that one. Sorry, I've got it mixed up.
Okay. Councillor Dr. Carr.
Could I just ask a question? I've already. Okay, just okay. It says that there was a presentation to an executive meeting between the NHSI and MFT on the 21st of June, and I just wondered when we would get some information about what happened at that meeting, what the outcomes were.
Okay, thank you. We will ask about that. Any other questions at all? I'd like to raise one, if it's okay, with the committee regarding just a comment that was made in the previous minutes about the service, which hasn't really carried forward. There was a mention of a video which was being produced to inform residents and employees and members. I would really like it if they could share that link to the video with us, if that's possible. Okay, thank you. Any other comments on that agenda item? Yes.
An observation, really, and I wonder if it could be included in further updates. There's not a lot in the report about how the recent the merger between Central Manchester and South Manchester and the proposed merger, how they really affect patients. So there's a lot of talk about integration and the benefits of integration, but I think it'd be useful to get a patient perspective on how they're finding that integration. Appreciate that if you go to a hospital, you're perhaps not always that bothered about the actual trust that's running it. But I say from personal experience and people I know that, you go to Wythenshawe and they can't access the records at Central Manchester and vice versa. So those sorts of issues do have an effect on the patient experience. And I think the future updates should reflect that, really.
Okay, you happy with that? Okay, thank you very much. So any other questions before we move on? Well, thank members for those questions, and we look forward to receiving the answers. So the next item on the agenda is the Care Quality Commission CQC action plan, and if it's okay with the council officers, if we could perhaps link that with the residential and nursing care home quality update. That's agenda item 13, because they do interlink really. So yeah, thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So I'm Diane Eaton, the Corporate Director for Adults in Trafford Council, and I have a number of people with me here who are going to help with any questions. And I'll ask them to introduce themselves first of all, if that's okay.
Hi, I'm Sarah Radcliffe, Corporate Director of Commissioning for Trafford Council and Trafford CCG.
Thank you.
Good evening, I'm Richard Spearing. I'm Managing Director of the Community Health Services in Trafford, and I also work with Diane managing the adult social care services on a day-to-day basis.
Thank you.
And I'm Karen Ahmed. I'm Director of All Age Commissioning for Trafford Council.
Thank you.
So just to explain why there's a number of people here, this is a system review that was completed by CQC in 2017, and I do appreciate the comment from the councillor about it's out of date, and that is part of what I'm going to be presenting tonight. We've presented the full report because that was what was asked for by the Scrutiny Committee last time, but when I get to the end you'll see why we are closing the review down and the action plan down, and we've started a new one because it is now very old and we've done a lot of the work, but I'll talk you through that. Okay. So system reviews were done by CQC across initially 12 areas in the country, and moving on to complete about 20 over the last 18 months. They picked areas for various reasons. So they picked us because we are struggling. This is one of our areas of intense pressure for Trafford, but they picked other areas that were doing really well so they could learn from that and try and share some of that information. So our review was completed in October 2017. So I'm going to take you through the journey that we've been on and through that process. So in 2017, there was a lot of hard work going on between partners to try and look at solutions, but we weren't working as a system, we were working in silos. So we had quite poor relationships across the system and a lot of blaming each other, which wasn't getting us where we needed to get to. Our average delayed transfers of care at that point were between 60 and 80 delayed transfers a day. That's 60 and 80 of my mum and your dad sat in a hospital bed who didn't need to be there. So that's a really significant problem. We also had quite considerable delays in our home care waiting list. So we were really struggling to let home care. And at one point we had around 90 people waiting for home care. So when we started this journey, we were in a very, very difficult position. Most of the long-term decisions around admissions to residential and nursing homes were being made in a hospital bed. And that puts a lot of pressure on families to make that kind of decision. It usually within about 2 or 3 weeks that we were seeking the move on. And the system really and the use of our community resources was very fragmented. So when CQC came in, we presented the work that we were planning to do. And their overall summary was, these are good plans, but you need to show that you can deliver change. So between September 17 and December 17, we introduced what we call Trafford's Urgent Care Control Room. And I've been a number of times to committees, so anyone who's been on here for a while will have heard some of that before. It's based at Meadway Health Centre. And we have a team, quite a large team there now that look at all of the delays in each of the 4 hospital sites that we cover, which is Wythenshawe, Trafford General, Salford Royal and the MRI are the main sites that people from Trafford tend to use. They track all of the delays and they try to match them to the community resources that we have. The community flow daily report is just issued twice a day, and it summarises everybody who's waiting for something, what they're waiting for, and all of the resources that we have at our disposal to then offer them as an option to go home. We established the control room as the place for escalation. So if there is somebody who is delayed that we're struggling with, or there's an issue with any of the sites going into escalation, i.e. A&Es are filling up and we can't move fast enough, that's escalated to the control room and they can respond and we can move staff around and move them onto the 4 sites as needed. We introduced some voluntary sector schemes into some of the hospitals, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute, but we're testing out different ways to use different types of services. We moved to having 7-day extended working in social work and our district nurse liaison, and we combined those two teams so we can offer a 7-day service. We reviewed Ascot House, which is where we operate our intermediate care from and discharge to assess beds. Opal House, which is a intermediate care type unit on the grounds of Wythenshawe Hospital, and Ward 6, which is a rehabilitation ward in Trafford General. And we revised the pathways so that they connected up and relaunched those. And we introduced something called discharge to assess beds, which is for people that don't need intermediate care, but they need some time to recover before they then move home, or we need further time to complete assessment work. As we moved through, we were quickly learning on some of the things that were working quickly, and we've moved much faster, I think, over the last 18 months than we've been able to do previously. And we introduced some quite significant changes during this period. We started looking at early discharge planning, so we were working with people through from admission rather than waiting for notifications. We developed something called Trafford Enhanced Care Home Team, which was piloted in 6 homes and supported people to remain in the home during a period of ill health, if that was safe to do so. And the testing of that is being analysed with a potential for a relaunch of a service that would cover all our homes in Trafford. We moved to full primary care extended access programme in place across the whole of the areas. We introduced a discharge manager at Wythenshawe to give more managerial capacity on that site, because that is the busiest site that we have, followed by Trafford General and then Salford. We looked at extending what we call our SAMS service, which is our reablement type offer, and we extended that with more services, more providers joining that to improve the flow in back home for people. We launched our winter plans, both 2017 and 2018, and created a lot less spikes. So part of the issue for health and social care is the activity in hospitals doesn't flow in a nice steady way. It would be great if it did, but we have quite significant spikes of activity, and then responding to those spikes can be quite difficult. And it would mean that we would then have quite long delays created at certain points in the year. For this period of time, we've managed that activity in a much more stable way. We extended our Stabilise and Make Safe service to include supporting people that need 2 carers. So that means there's quite an increase in the requirement for staffing those situations. And we again extended the discharge to assess beds up to 28 plus the 9 that we have at Ascot House. And all that happened within that 3-month period. And then this was the result. So we went from having very significant delays per 100,000 population to seeing, as you can see at the end here, a 50% reduction in the delays in social care caused by delays from social care. And overall, we've seen during the period of the year at the bottom, we've seen between a 26 and a 47% reduction in the previous year delays, which is considerable, and a tribute to all of the teams who have worked very hard. However, if it was my dad who was sat in the bed delayed, it's still a delay that's unacceptable. So we haven't stopped. We continue to work really hard on looking at some of the solutions. We haven't done this alone. We've worked very closely with each of the hospital sites, but also with Greater Manchester, to look at some of the techniques that work to get people back home or back to the place that they will then live in the best possible way. We have to manage that, obviously, carefully, because we want people to go home safely as well. So we don't want people to go home so quickly that they then return very quickly to hospital. So we manage that very carefully together with the acute sites. So what have we learned? It's been a big learning curve because there's a lot of new things being tested, and it's being clear which things work and which things are just nice to do, because obviously we need to make sure that we can manage this within the financial remits as well. But we've learned that working as a partnership and proactively together and not blaming each other certainly gets us a lot further. Our workforce face increasing pressures on those sites, so we do have a lot of turnover in some of the hospital teams, particularly in social care because of the pressure that they're under. But I think that applies within nursing, etc. as well. They are, it's very busy sites. We've learned that we have to be quite flexible and we have to work in a different way, particularly around how commissioning at speed. And we've learned an awful lot about being able to bring in services very quickly because the landscape changes. The choice policy, which is a policy it's a national policy that's applied in each of the hospitals, where people refuse to move out of the hospital when they are medically fit, or they are going through a process of choosing somewhere for their family member to live, enables people to have up to 28 days to make those decisions. And the hospitals are trying through that period to encourage them to move on. That in itself causes us quite a big issue collectively. And we are talking across Manchester and Trafford about how we might work with the choice policy. Changing and challenging behaviours are very difficult. As a population, we all want things very instantly nowadays. So if you go online, you get an instant answer to things. And I think a lot of that applies within the use of the hospitals. People go to A&E because it's open all the time. You get a very quick and a very swift response to your needs, and managing the behaviour of the population is something we all need to help with. There's lots of activity across Greater Manchester and nationally around using 111, etc., to try and meet needs in a different way. We've learned quite a lot about utilising the voluntary sector, and that's been very positive and something we're building on. Our next phase needs to look at who we can help to not go to hospital if it's not actually the route that needs to be taken, and I'll tell you what we're doing about that. And we need to work earlier in the journey in the hospital so that we can move people more quickly home. Part of the work that we've done is the utilisation of Ascot House, which is we've been using for intermediate care and a mixture of discharge to assess beds. We've had some very, very positive inspections from CQC on that site, with comments about everybody needs one of these. But we've done a lot of work with commissioners about how we can flex that unit so that we can take a wider group of people, wider level of need in the future, and how we do further work with the other sites to improve the flow for people. So progress to date. We've been testing some A&E streaming in Wythenshawe Hospital, which we're just reviewing and ready to relaunch a streaming process, which is around using primary care at the front door to divert anyone that doesn't need that kind of support. We have 3 care navigators on site at Wythenshawe, which are helping families to find their way through the system and work out the best solutions, find community resources, etc. We've been looking and testing smoking cessation around using the CURE programme at Wythenshawe Hospital, which has been quite successful. We've been looking at some of the admission avoidance work, particularly linking with a couple of GPs in Central and creating an option for them to ring Meadway Health Centre if they feel that somebody needs urgent attention but doesn't need to go into hospital, and then we step them up into, for instance, Ascot House, or use our community enhanced nursing and therapy teams to support them at home. We've been using our discharge to assess beds in Ascot more flexibly to meet a greater need. We've been working with MWAS around community paramedics in Trafford, which has been really helpful. We've had increased social work capacity and leadership in a number of the sites to support the demand and making sure that the caseloads are manageable enough for them to work fast enough. We've been testing some blood analysis machines at Meadway so we can do rapid testing in community. We have a joint strategic urgent care board now with Manchester because a lot of our activity crosses over those borders. And as we move to having a community services that's linked with Manchester, we think there's some benefits for working more closely together. We've got further extended work with the third sector. Our care homes team is about to be relaunched, and we have bought into some extra care flats at Limelight for people who have housing issues and can't return home because of those housing issues. So we've learned an awful lot in that period of time, But as you said, things have moved on. So our proposal is that we actually close the CQC report down, and that all but about one action will be finished and carry forward into the new list. There's a little bit of a story here, because it's always, I think, important to remember that there's people in the middle of all of this process. So this lady was in her 90s, and she was supported at home. She was really struggling. She had an infection. GP felt she needed to be admitted. We were looking to admit her through the urgent care control room to discharge to assess bed at Ascot. She became unwell and was admitted to hospital, but only for one night, because they were able to pull her out quickly because we knew about her, we knew where she was and what she needed. And we would have taken her that night, but it was 11 o'clock at night. And it's not right to be moving very elderly people around at that time, particularly, depending on the weather. It might be a bit easier today with the heat, but certainly in the winter we wouldn't be moving people around after about 6 o'clock. And she was then able to go back home after a period of support at Ascot to be able to regain her strength and her confidence. Our next step is to be able to step straight into that resource from home. So just to conclude, the phase of work that we're entering now is about admission prevention and reduction of length of stay in hospital. So our delays have continued to come down. At the moment, we were running at about 20 delays yesterday. But the group of people that we're looking at now are the people who have been in hospital for a number of weeks. And we're looking, all the sites are looking at people who've been in over 7, 14 and 21 days. The group of people that we're particularly interested is between 14 and 21 days, because that's where we feel we could make the biggest difference. So we are launching a transformation of our intermediate care service. So at the moment we have Ascot House, we have our community enhanced nursing and therapy teams, we have social workers working 7 days, we have our reablement services, etc. What we want to do is bring them all together into one model that will help us to move faster. We're reviewing our staffing structures and function of the urgent care control room, because we want to build on the success there and take that to the next step, where GPs will be able to ring in and get that immediate step up. And we're looking at a triage pilot, which has gone live in Wythenshawe Hospital, which enables social workers to work with the wards and enable us to pick out people that could go home more quickly and work with them before they get to the point of being a delay. And we have we've put in a new team manager at Wythenshawe to support the activity there, because it is still a very, very busy site. So it is our proposal, Chair, that we close the CQC action plan. We will then bring the new plans as updates here as we move forward. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. That's a really interesting report and very complicated. Obviously, lots of strands of work going into that. Did the committee have any questions for Ms. Eden? Councillor Dr. Carr.
I would just like to ask, from the report, it says that emergency admissions in the 65 plus group have remained consistently above the England average and increased in the last 2 quarters of 17-18. I just wondered, in terms of the plan moving forward, what we were going to be doing about supporting advanced care planning in the community and highlighting frailty, so that we can target advanced care planning to appropriate patients and residents in Trafford.
Okay, that's a good question, and happy to answer that. So I think, just drawing on the points that Diane's made, I think the real strength in the model and the success has been around the integration. So I know some people here have been to visit the service at Meadway, and the nurses, the therapists and social workers work very closely together, and it's hard to tell who's who in terms of the leadership and management, because of the level of integration. Now, I think what we've done is that we think we've got to what we would call a sort of new normal position in terms of the delays, so supporting people coming home, and that's fairly stable now. The point that you're making really relates to 2 aspects, I think, which is the population growth that we're seeing, and the increasing complexity of some of the presentations that we're getting, but also the fact that we need to have a much more integrated response to support people staying at home so they don't have to go into hospital. And Diane was referring to that towards the end of her presentation. So the next big piece of work we're doing is what we would call the step up work, which is there earlier. So the same arrangements will now apply. So what our plan would be is to, we're piloting with a couple of GP practices. So we've got a rapid response service that can go and see people at home. We want to then develop an integrated team in each of the 4 neighbourhoods that will be able to support people at home. We have advanced care planning in place, and we've piloted that again in terms of the TECT model that Diane was talking. So we're now looking at a team that will be developing that to do a sort of single solution across the different neighbourhoods in Trafford. So really, in summary, that's the next stage of the work for the reasons that you've pointed out and highlighted to us in the report.
We are working with Dr. Lauren Wentworth around the frailty work. So one of the proposals for the intermediate care review is that at a neighbourhood level, as we identify people who are moving into that period of life, that we use the tool as a part of our screening to help with the risk stratification work. So it is at a very early stage that, and I know you're at Salford, aren't you? So that obviously we want to work with all the sites on that. So we may need to link across with Lauren and connect that up.
I know this is just being piloted. Those GPs, are they actually in Manchester or are they in Trafford?
No, the 2 Trafford GP practices are in the central neighbourhood. But I've actually been meeting and talking with the GPs as part of the new networks that have just been established. And this is something that they all will become involved in very shortly.
And just on that, we actually have a clinical lead for frailty as well within the CCG, which is a Trafford GP who's been sort of our frailty lead for a few years in terms of priority demographics as we move forward.
Thank you. Councillor Taylor. Oh, okay. Fine.
I noticed in the report there was about a community flow lead, and that was meant to be put in place. Has anything happened with that? That's on page 70.
Yes, the community flow lead started in December 17. And this is your point, really, that is now old news because we've moved on to other things. But she's been in post now since then and has really driven some of this change. And so she's been really instrumental. We've actually, it's worked so well, we've now put a deputy community flow in as well, just because we want to operate more effectively and longer hours.
Councillor Taylor.
Thank you, Chair. Question for Mr. Spearing, really, I think. Are you able to give us an update about waits for community rehabilitation? Where, because I understand anecdotally that there are quite significant waits when people are discharged from hospital, that come home after a period of rehabilitation, and then, that all that stops for quite some time when they are at home.
Yes, so you're right to point that out. That is the case. What we're doing is a couple of things, which is that we're going to be we're remodeling the service and the way it works, which sorry, but I'm just went off. Did you catch me from the beginning?
Yeah, you said you were going to remodel
so
the
we
service.
Are going to. We're planning to do that at the moment. I've been meeting regularly with the therapy leads as part of doing that. But we're also going to be instigating a waiting list initiative to support people now, and also make sure that we're in a position to make the changes that we want to do as well.
Okay, are you able to give us a little bit more detail about remodelling the service? How do you envisage it might look, and how would that impact on wait times?
Well, not now, because it's something that we're working on. But I think if it's something as a committee you'd be interested in, it would be something perhaps we could bring back, because it's part of the next wave of the transformation that we're wanting to make in Trafford. So
yeah.
That would be my suggestion if that's something that you would want us to do.
Okay, and what are you thinking about in terms of waiting list initiatives? So that's something that's ongoing at the moment?
We're looking at that at the moment, yeah.
Yeah, and anything that you can add to that at all, or tell us how that would look, or is that just in the planning stage?
Well, we're looking at the moment, speaking to staff about doing additional hours, and also looking at using a bank or agency to support that.
Okay, thank you. Thanks.
Councillor Akinade, did you want to come back on your original question?
No, it was an additional question,
okay.
but
Okay, that's fine. Okay.
That's my fault.
oh yeah, there we go. It was just in your presentation about the extra care flats at Limelight, the ability to flex up to 6. Can you tell me a bit more about that? And is that just because at the moment there's some vacancies in Limelight, and what will happen once those vacancies are no longer there? Have you?
It's a permanent offer, so in order to be able to change the usage of those flats, Trafford Housing Trust had to make representation to the relevant department of the government to change the use of the flats. So it is a permanent offer. We started small because we weren't sure what the take-up of those flats would be like, and it's a new model that we're testing. Manchester City Council themselves have already started to do something similar as well, so we're able to benchmark and compare and contrast across the system, but it seems to be working really well.
Okay. Councillor Acton's been waiting very patiently. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. It was about the discharges, the delayed discharges, and it says in the report, the CQC, well, the report prior to the CQ report itself, that the target for Greater Manchester for delayed transfers is 3.3, I think it is. Are we achieving that now?
So in Trafford we aren't. We were at 4.5 this week. So we track this all of the time, and it's tracked across the whole. Each of the sites are tracked. Some days and weeks we can achieve it, and then other weeks we can't, and that's why we need to get more of these services in place to get that variation down. So we aren't there yet. Across Greater Manchester, we have achieved it as a number of points. We achieved it last Christmas. In fact, we overachieved, but then straight after Christmas, because of the activity levels, it'll go up again. So we aren't at 3.3%, and it's 3.3% of the whole of the bed stock is blocked by a delay. That's the measure itself.
So obviously other authorities are actually doing better than us then?
Yes, some authorities are doing better than us, and some authorities are struggling as we are. So we aren't on our own. Nationally, we aren't on our own. For social care, we're about 23rd from the bottom in 150 local authorities. We were in the bottom 3, so we've had a massive increase, but we're still only 23rd. I would like to be 141st if we can get up that end of the list, but we've a lot to do still.
And obviously all the initiatives that are going on to try to bring this down, how is that being funded, and are some of the funding that you get, is it time limited? Are they grants for certain periods to get over a situation in terms of how you develop in the service? So, I mean, obviously funding is pretty critical in terms of what is trying to be done.
So it's a really good question. It is always a tension, isn't it, between the budgets we have to spend, and we run a massively demand-led budget in adult social care and again in health services. But we also have a responsibility to people, so it is a tension. We get some monies in from winter pressures. So last year, this financial year, we have 1.6 million in the budget to support winter pressures. Most of that goes on these services and on packages of care that people require. But it is only it's a time limited budget. That we do also obviously have the use of the budgets that we have within the council, which we reconfigure as we change the service offer wherever we can. But it does create a significant pressure on the budget.
I think just a final point really on that, because it seems to me that that's what we need to be monitoring is the new initiatives to bring down the figures in terms of delayed transfers. I'm not saying it's all reliant on funding, but a lot of it is reliant, those new initiatives. And I think we need to know, when the funding finishes for certain initiatives that you're actually providing to enable us to, to make plans, if you like. The council needs to make plans around, that impact of those funding streams just suddenly stopping. And if we don't know, we just think, oh, well, it's gone up or it's gone down, these delayed transfers. So I think that's important to us, and well, it is to me. And I think, the report sometimes should have some kind of summary that gives us that performance on certain aspects of the CQC action plans and that. And I think sometimes, I plan, I've ploughed through all these reports, and the presentation really was just about what we've done since that. And I think if we could try in future just to summarise some of the stuff. I know this has been asked for, but for me, I found it very difficult just to plough through that report, and then the meat of everything is what you actually said, and I didn't have that in front of me. So I think for me it was slightly frustrating, because I've ploughed through all of that, and what I want to know is what's happening today, really.
Yeah, and absolutely take that point, and was quite concerned about the size of the documents, but they were requested, so obviously I don't want you to think that we're not showing you the full detail either. We're happy to just use the summary in future that we've prepared. Yeah.
Yes, I mean, I think as a committee in general, I think we would really appreciate reports that were a bit more focused on the issues. And obviously, it is great to have detail, but it's getting through it and remembering it all and being able to absorb it all. So it would be really helpful to have very focused reports. We are hoping to set more focused agendas, so that'll probably and hopefully lead to more focused reports. So could I just have, if there are any other questions from members, Councillor Dr. Carr.
Could I just ask, what are the operating hours for the urgent care control room?
So at the moment it's 9 to 5. We are, as part of our next phase, looking if we go live with a full step-up service for GPs, we would need to go 24/7. So that's just what we're working through, the implications of that at the moment.
Sorry, just to clarify, is that 9 to 5 Monday to Friday? Yeah. Okay.
Okay, any more questions from members of the committee? Councillor Dr. Carr.
And what's the performance? Obviously, from a CQC perspective, Ascot House is doing really well, and that's great news. But I just wondered, what is the performance of those discharged to assess beds in terms of, are we seeing a high readmission rate from those beds?
So Karen's just led a piece of work to look at readmission rates from all of the resources that we use for short-term support. So the discharge to assess, stabilise and make safe services, etc. And we're just analysing that now. So it's not, I don't think it's particularly higher than any of the residential homes, but we're looking at the causes, because some of those causes might be some of the answers to the things we need in the care homes team, like if somebody has a UTI, etc., how we might deal with that differently in the community. So we're using some of that data to help us with some of that. We also track the flow through those beds, and we're just looking at whether if we can reconfigure slightly the way we offer them, could we create a quicker flow through the beds as well, so we can maximise further those resources.
Thank you. So if there aren't any other questions from committee members, may I just ask one very brief question myself? And that's on page 30 of the document that we have about admission avoidance and home care to prevent hospital admissions. You do mention introducing as a pilot some low-level clinical support, and I just wondered if you could detail what that clinical support might be.
Sorry.
No, it's fine.
Just found the point in the document is very big. I'm very sorry. So that's thinking about reskilling and changing the nature of the home care workforce. And it's linked very much to the programme that Diane's just described. So our intention is to look at something we're calling blended roles across Greater Manchester, where we train some of the home care staff to provide more of a holistic service, and taking on some of the low-level clinical interventions that might be required. For example, putting eye drops in. Identification of UTIs, those kinds of things, taking blood pressure. So nothing that would require a trained nurse, but something that might help with early identification of issues that we might prevent hospital admission or readmission, and certainly improve somebody's quality of life at home by having one worker who knows you well going in and carrying out all of those activities.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Taylor.
Can I just ask you a question about that? Would those home carers have the time to do those kind of activities? Because historically, we hear about home carers, they have 15-minute visits, undertaking those additional, slightly higher level clinical skills, take some time. And also, would their pay reflect those additional responsibilities?
It certainly would in terms of the pay. So we've piloted this approach previously, and we paid salaries, and it roughly worked out around £19 an hour that we were paying for those members of staff. It's already been trialled in Thameside, and they pay an average of £17 an hour. So we think that because it was a pilot, probably we were paying over the odds, and that seems to be the going rate across Greater Manchester. So in terms of salaries, they certainly would be higher. It does vary from organisation to organisation. We're at the beginning of a massive home care transformation programme, and we are looking at how we can provide a different kind of home care support. So it's home care that actually is more person-centred, where somebody actually spends more time with you. So the outcomes aren't just physical outcomes in terms of making sure somebody's washed, dressed and has enough to eat. It's actually providing that human contact as well, making sure that people are connected to their local communities. We carried out, this was a couple of years ago now, a piece of work with just exploring with people who are currently in receipt of home care and district nursing services, what their views were on the current service and how they'd like to see it improve. And nearly all of those respondents said they felt very lonely and isolated. So we know that's something we have to build into the service going forward. And delivering 15-minute visits doesn't improve that. So in a nutshell, we have to do things differently. We have to be more outcome focused rather than time and task focused. And we need to reorganise the services in order to do that. But we are at the very beginning of it. But it's certainly something that we're not going to let go and we want to address.
Okay, thank you.
And that's it for questions from committee members. I would like to thank you very much for the report and also your presentation. Very, very helpful and illuminating. So perhaps we could note progress made to date in delivering the improvements that you've detailed. And in particular, the continued reduction in delays of transfers of care, which is welcome. We're also asked to note the changing focus of the work and the inclusion of length of stay as a new national target. I know we haven't particularly talked about that today, but it was in our report. And we're also asked to note the closure of the CQC action plan and the focus on admissions avoidance and intermediate care in order to maintain and improve performance in the delayed transfer of care. Members were also asked to consider an update in 6 months' time, but could I just ask, will you have made significant progress on this in 6 months' time, or do you feel it should be a longer period? Thank you. Or maybe perhaps shorter period?
I think 6 months is reasonable for us to come back with the next phase updates, because I would expect to see a further reduction in delays and work around the admission avoidance to be going live, the new home care contracts to be going live in the hospitals in December. So there should be quite significant.
Thank you very much. That sounds great. So are members happy to note and accept all of those? That's fantastic. Thank you very much indeed. So Marina, it's back to you for item 13.
So, as there's new members, we've started with a bit of an introduction for you around residential and nursing homes. So, Obviously, you will see a lot of activity in the press around quality of provision across the market, if you like, nationally around these services. So in Trafford, we have 57 CQC registered residential or nursing home providers. We have 1,600 beds in total in those homes. 21 of those homes support or specialist support people with mental health issues and learning disabilities. And 192 beds in those homes. We have 33 that specialise in older people over 65 provision, and there's 1,200 approximately beds in that area. They're spread out, as you can see, across the borough, apart from Inder and Massey. They're not really where we would like them because they are businesses and they've grown up over a number of years. So we are looking, as we do work on shaping the market and changing some of that, we would hope to have a greater spread. We have been working, and Karen's team, I have to say, have excelled in the work that they've done. We've been working really hard over the last 18 months to try to improve the quality of care homes in Trafford, as the whole of Greater Manchester and the whole of the country have. In April 18, our number of homes that achieved a good or outstanding rating, and I'll say good because there weren't any outstanding, was 54%, which was very low. After all the work that Karen's team have led, by April 19, we are now at 77%, which is a significant increase of 18% over the 12-month period. It is one of the fastest improving quality in the whole of the Northwest. And in fact, as a region, the Northwest is one of the fast improving areas in the country. We have our first outstanding care home, which we'll show you a little bit more about in a minute, as well, which has been brilliant, because once we know what getting outstanding means, in reality, we can help other homes to achieve that. Some of the inspections reports that we have looked at that have come back as good, we find it hard to know what they would need to do to achieve outstanding because they are providing very good care. So it's understanding what takes that step into that next level. So we've seen a significant increase going up, but obviously we want to get that as high as we possibly can, because everyone deserves to have the best support that they can get, because this is their home. Now, I do apologise. I have scrutinised every one of these presentations for abbreviations. I thought I'd cracked it, but this is a PDF and I can't change the Northwest ADAS heading at the top, so I apologise. So that stands for Northwest Association of Directors of Adult Social Services. And we track the work that's being achieved across the whole of GM so that we can compare and learn from each other. So this chart shows you what are the areas that CQC are looking at, and they're listed there, which many of you, particularly if you're in the professional backgrounds that you will know that they're looking at the offer of care and support, that they are caring for the people that they serve, they're responsive, effective, safe and well led. And you can see that the issue mainly is about leadership. So a registered manager of care home is totally responsible for the provision. It's a very important role, but it's one that's really not valued in the system that we operate in. And so when there is activity and turnover of a leader in those homes, the homes can actually flounder really quickly. So we've been putting a lot of support into the leadership of the homes, and that is improving, but not as quickly as we'd like it to. We have a significant variation in the size of our homes, and that really impacts when it comes onto the leadership. Go on to the next one. So you can see we've across ADAS, we've split a small home is under about 30 beds, the medium's 30 to 50, and the large homes are over 50 beds. And when you get into the over 50 bed homes, the ability to ensure that the care is at the quality we want it to be gets harder, just because of the number of people that they're supporting. And as we have a number of a high number of larger homes, our journey is harder to create that change. So certainly as we move forward, we are looking at smaller homes because they're more personalised anyway, but they're also much easier to manage and to keep the quality where it needs to be. So some of the things that make excellence. Urmston Manor is the home that achieved outstanding earlier this year, and they go the extra mile. So some of the things, and we've been putting a lot of these in the press at the moment, so people can see the things that the excellent homes are achieving. They link with the young people in the local school, which I'll talk a bit more about in a minute. They have people coming in, they have a lot of activities, both in and out of the home. They have a lot of volunteers. They sustain their staffing, so they have consistent staffing and train them up to a very high level. And the inspectors were really, really impressed with this home. The manager and leader of this home is now supporting and coaching other homes with achieving that excellence. And we do have 2 of our homes which are linked to the GM teaching care homes programme, which is hoping to spread some of that learning. One of the other initiatives that we've developed is to adopt a care home, we've called it. So we've worked with the primary heads. So one of Karen's team has been working with with the heads of primary schools to try to link every primary school to a care home for visiting and intergenerational work between the young people and the people in the care home. We believe that the people that are living in the homes have a lot to offer. Their knowledge of life is extensive. They may need support physically, but they still have a lot to share. When we went to meet the primary heads, they were overwhelmingly excitedly about doing this. So we've got about 12, I think now, primary schools that wish to link with homes. And again, these are the kind of things that CQC are looking for as that step into excellence. So it's beyond the care provision, really. So we'll bring more of that back as we move forward. Further initiatives. So we operate what we call an iTool, which is a quality tool that we again Karen's quality team support the homes in advance of an inspection, and helps them to look at the areas that they need to improve. That will go on a web base, which will make things a lot easier for them to utilise, but also for our teams to manage some of the improvements and cross over and look at the where homes are making the same mistakes or same issues arising. With the CCG, we've developed a training cooperative, which means that we will register workers. They will receive training, we'll be able to track the training. So if they move from one home to another at the moment, they have then a new induction, they have to repeat all the same training, whereas this will enable us to passport that training around the system. We're developing better links with the fire service. We've got projects to improve oral care, hydration, nutrition, medication, etc. So some of the key issues that cause some of the problems around the inspections. The development of the blended roles that Karen mentioned, so staff will be trained up to a higher level. And as you know, the council earlier in the year adopted the ethical care charter, so we're linking that to increasing the pay, training and conditions of the workforce, and ultimately attracting more people into social care, because that's what we need. It's an exciting and amazing profession to be in, and links into the professions in all of the health sector as well. So it helps people a stepping stone in their career. We've also got a Greater Manchester Quality Improvement and Best Practice in Care forum now, so people can share across the whole of GM some of the learning. 2 of our Trafford homes are part of the Teaching Homes programme. We've been testing a red bag scheme, which is if people have to go into hospital, their personal data moves in and out with them, and we're looking at how we can roll that out across all the homes. And I love this one. We've purchased 2 Motiview bikes, which you cycle in front of a screen. It can be your road, it can be Italy, it can be France, wherever and you can cycle through there and you feel like you're actually out and about and enjoying the area. And the homes are going to be testing those to see if they wish to take that on. Again, it helps with mobility. It also gets people excited about what they're doing and brings back a lot of memories for people. And if we move on to the next one. And we've been looking at we have some amazing staff in these homes, and I wish we could play this, but I don't know if we can play it. But the first one, this young carer sings every morning to residents as he's supporting them to get up. Oh, Something's happening. It may not work, so I warn you. Yeah, we'll just have a few minutes because he does sing for quite a long time, so we'll just do a few seconds if it works. Again, it's an example of some of the things that make a difference. I'll carry on and see if it comes on, shall I? The personal relationships that people have with the people that are living in the homes is what makes the difference to good quality care. And so we are looking at some of the ways that we can encourage and share some of that interaction and the relationships that people build. We don't want one about planes, do we? So we won't put that on. Carry on with the presentation. And also on this, scroll down.
Yeah.
You want to see him sing now, don't you? Yeah. Go down. Oops.
It is. It's just further down.
There he is. There he is. But the sound don't work now.
No, that's the end of
You've finished it now. I don't know if it's as great as you're going to expect it to be now. The anticipation. Right, that's probably enough now. Most of us just have the radio on, but actually it makes for waking up when you're not feeling very well much more pleasant, doesn't it? A number of homes are also utilising some of the things around cycling in the new major cycle machinery that we've now got, which they can buy in for certain periods of time. They're linking into things like the Alzheimer's memory walk and fun activities that are outside of the home, which is a very different way of looking at some of the provision than we had before. And then just to end, and again, we won't play it because we will be here a while trying to get it, but this is one of the ladies who was teaching other people to dance. And it's really great because we need to make sure people have fun in the homes as well, because it is their home. So a lot of work's being completed, but we still have a way to go. But there has been significant improvements across the system in Trafford.
Well, thank you very much, and I'm sure the committee would like to make comment on the first outstanding home in Trafford. That's really wonderful achievement, and it's great to hear that homes generally you've got such a high percentage of good and now outstanding homes. Could I just ask before I invite other members of the committee, in terms of the homes that are still require improvement, are they going to be the homes that you'll be focusing these initiatives on? Because clearly it'd be nice to get even more into the good section.
So yes, we had again a year ago we had about 6 or 7 inadequate homes, and we last year closed 5 of those homes, which was a significant piece of work, a significant I can't speak properly, a significant change for the people that live in those homes. It was very significant. However, when the quality is not acceptable, we have to take action. We lost about 150 beds in the market last year. but actually the ones we've got are better quality, which ultimately, if you think about the previous presentation, prevents admissions to hospital because if their care is better, they can remain at home in a safer way. We are focusing now on, we have one inadequate home, which has actually got nobody in now, and that will close. We've got a number of requires improvements. They all have an action plan with detailed interventions. Those are the ones that we're visiting more often to keep an eye on and their improvement. And they're the ones we're trying to link into some of the teaching homes work, etc.
Thank you for clarifying that. Questions from members, please. Any questions? Councillor Akinola.
Can I ask what percentage of the nursing homes and care homes in Trafford are voluntary or charitable ones rather than private homes?
We'll just check on that. We think they're all private, but we'll just check on it and come back to you. We'll send that back in through the board.
Can I also ask, you were talking about carers doing increased services like doing blood pressure and stuff, and you were saying that across the board it was about working out about £19 an hour. In those care homes, your contracts, if I remember rightly, are asking for the living wage, but your hourly rate, according to the report in 2017, was one of the lower ones in Greater Manchester. Has it improved so that it reflects the amount that you want staff to be paid?
So we don't set the rate that staff are paid at. The provider sets the rate that staff are paid at. We set an hourly rate for home care and we work with providers to agree a bed rate. Trafford have their own bed rate, but the price that providers charge often is in excess of that. So it's really up to the providers. The ones that we know have a stable staff team pay their staff well in excess of the living wage already. So when we've spoken to our residential providers, they've said when we've been talking about the ethical care contract that actually they are already paying above the national minimum wage. So it would only be if we would have to. I think that figure was for a pilot, so we could just test out and trial different ways of working. We don't think that would be the price, certainly for care homes. We think that would be different to home care staff.
Has Trafford's fee gone up that you pay? Because it was one of the low ones in the fee. It was in 2007, it was £14.4, but the average was £15 something.
It goes up every year. Every year we review. This is for home care, not care homes again, isn't it? So every year we undertake an analysis of what the impact of the national living wage is and what the impact of the RPI is, the inflationary index, and we adjust the payment according to that. We always go and talk to providers beforehand about what we're proposing to do. And so they're always well informed. We have spoken to providers in the past about sharing with us the breakdown of their costs and what that looks like. We've had very poor response from providers. They don't want to share what they view clearly as being commercial evidence. So I think our home care rate is one of the. It's usually in the middle. Yeah, usually in the middle for Greater Manchester generally.
Okay.
Councillor Thomas.
There we go. You said in the report that there's a difference in the rate of improvement between small, medium and large homes. In them homes, there's a difference in the ratio of members of staff per resident, or sorry, vice versa, residents per member of staff, or do they have the same across the board?
So the ratio of staffing is based on the needs of the clients. So if a home is taking a lot of people with very complex needs, they'll have a higher ratio of staff. There are some very vague minimums set by CQC, but if Karen's team are inspecting a home, they'll look at the needs of the people living there and then judge whether that's adequate staffing to meet the needs. It doesn't particularly vary between small and bigger homes about numbers of staff. I think it's about the personal approach and the relationships you can build with a smaller number of people than the 70, 80 bed type homes. Does that answer your question?
I tend to agree that, you know, the personal relationships that you can engender. What I'm trying to get at is, if there were two homes, one of 20 beds and one of 70 or 80 beds, would there be the same ratio of staff per resident? So if, for example, in the 20-bed home, there were 5 staff that had 4 patients per se, not obviously allocated, would there be the same ratio of patients to staff in a larger home? Or is it a case that in a larger home, you're going to get 7 or 8 patients per member of staff? Because obviously they're all private homes, profit is involved as the businesses and they're working for a profit. But that would obviously impact on the standard of care and the rate of improvement.
I think, again, it varies by home. I think the bigger homes, because they would need more staff, often, well, in the inspection feedbacks we get, often have more agency staff, which means you've got a poorer consistency of care. So I wouldn't say that they have less staff or more people to support, because they should have staffing to meet need. But it's about whether they can retain the numbers of staff they need in a bigger home.
Thank you. Any other questions? Councillor Hartley, please.
Thank you. Diane, I think it was just at the end of your presentation, you were talking about provider exits and the loss of beds, and I obviously understand the need to close a home if it's consistently delivering inadequate care. So in the report, it talks about the loss of beds and the relocation of 98 vulnerable adults. And we know that relocating vulnerable adults has quite a great effect on their health and well-being, so something to be avoided. So in the report, it does mention Trafford has developed their own contingency plans for market exit. And I wondered if you could say a bit more about that, about what those plans are. And I'm mindful that there is a need to ensure the quality of care, but there are facilities that are lying empty in Trafford. So, for example, St Mark's Centre in Ashton on Mersey is pretty much a brand new facility, and it's empty. And so, do those contingency plans cover trying to provide for the continuation of care, even if the provider's dropping out of the market? I know that's probably easier said than done, but it strikes me that would be the best outcome.
So there's a programme of work that we are undertaking around how we create market stability, which is through lots of different approaches, really. And St Mark's it was devastating when that one closed, because actually we thought we could work with that. That was a decision of the provider, that one. And it is, I think the owner is looking to do something with that. So we work with the markets themselves, and we're trying to work with them as partners, because they should be our partners, really. That's the best way to develop the market. But we're looking at a variety of options. If we purchase different, if we pay differently, if we develop different type of models of support, how would that look? Obviously, that takes quite a lot of modelling work. The exit and the contingency plans for exiting the market, we have learned an awful lot and collated all of that into a plan. So if there is a potential risk, we can activate the plan very quickly. We have a team that come together, because St Mark's, for instance, there were, I think, 17 different funders involved in that closure. So we had conference calls with local authorities and CCGs across the country to support the moves of that. So it is and it isn't something you want to do. You don't want to close a home. You don't want to move people who are settled somewhere. So you have to do it with the families, with the person, and as quickly as you can, so that people don't worry. So it's the contingency plan captures all of that so that we can do that. However, that's still not what we'd want to do. We want to maintain the support that we have in the borough and develop that, but develop the quality part as well.
Okay, yes, carry on. Yeah, that's fine.
There's quite a few measures in the paper that are around ensuring that you have data where you think there is a risk of poor care being provided, which I know I can't find, but let me have a look. Yes, so on page 118 in the papers, there's talk there about the provider concerns portal and information sharing protocol across Northwest providers, and then for a future initiative, there's the web-based quality tool, which I think is a self-assessment tool. So I suppose what I'm wondering is, do those tools, which sound like they're aimed at sharing data about providers, do they help in giving you advance notice that a home is failing to provide good care, but also that the provider might be thinking of exit?
So across Greater Manchester and across the Northwest, we often share providers. So in Trafford, we're fortunate in that we don't have any Four Seasons homes, for example. But one of the examples of the 2 homes that we closed last year, the Shores, they were owned by a company that also had a home in Salford. And that home closed first. I think if we'd shared the information at that point and recognised that it was the same provider, we would have undertaken some financial due diligence in order to assure ourselves the company was in the right place. They weren't. And it's actually quite difficult when you go on Companies House to work out what the financial position is, because they will have a number of bank accounts, a number of different companies, and it's quite tricky tracking your way through. But those kind of things where a provider decides to exit the market in one part of GM is an indicator potentially that they may be thinking of doing the same in your area. Equally, if you have quality concerns in one area, this doesn't hold across the whole piece. But that helps you be aware that you just need to keep an eye on what's going on within your area, those kind of things. So we're starting to share it more much more systematically. That we're still at the very early stages of it. As Diane mentioned, our contingency plan, because we had to work in some very difficult circumstances very quickly, we've gained a lot of experience. So we've used that experience to develop a tool and to improve upon the national tool as well, because the national tool was very much written by people who were sat in an ivory tower and thought this is what you should do, but actually hadn't had experience of delivering it. So we've been using our experience to inform the Northwest position as well as our own position. The iTool, you're correct in saying it's a self-assessment, but I think it might be useful to explain that we ask providers initially to self-assess, then we go in and carry out our own assessment, and that then gives us a tool to talk through with the provider where they think they are performing well and we think perhaps they're not, so that we can start to engage with them and have those meaningful discussions so that we can work with providers to improve the quality in those areas, particularly when they've got a CQC inspection coming. And they find that very useful because that really helps them focus the work that they're doing. I just think if there's anything. And the intelligence also is very useful. So we have lots of intelligence that comes through. We have whistleblowing, as you might expect. That might come into our system in terms of health and social care. Equally, it might go to the CQC. So we work very closely with the CQC so that where there's any whistleblowing concerns, they come straight to us. We go out, we do unannounced visits. We make sure that we're mindful of soft intelligence from social workers where they go out to visit. We monitor complaints and safeguarding as well to make sure that we're on top of all of those issues, so that we know that if there's a provider that suddenly starts to have a lot of safeguarding concerns or a lot of complaints in a particular area, that we need to visit and look at whether or not there's a commissioning issue we need to pick up as well as an individual issue. So we are quite reactive as well as being proactive in our work. We've got a fairly small team. We expanded it through the IBCF monies, as we explained in the CQC report. But we've got very good working relationships now with providers that we didn't have previously. We've worked really closely with them, and they now value our input rather than seeing it as a hindrance, and that helps too.
Very briefly, any very short questions now for the officers, as time's short? Okay. Well, thank you very much indeed for your report and for your presentation and for answering all our questions. The committee will note the progress that you've made to date, and that we request regular updates at 6 monthly intervals on the quality within the market. So thank you very much indeed. Thank you. So moving on, we're going to move back to agenda item 11. And I just wanted to mention that we appreciate that this is an interim report because the full report will be coming to us in the autumn. And just wondered, in terms of shortage of time, if members are happy to just wait for the full report, because we've read the interim report, it's been in our report pack. Committee members happy with that? Okay, thank you very much. So we've been asked to note the report for agenda item, and we noted. Councillor Taylor.
Just to add to that, I think in the previous item, and I guess in this one to a certain extent, when we're talking about the CQC, had some nice examples of how the changes that you're implementing are being, real life examples. You talked about the 90-year-old lady, and just those little examples there that you had. I think a report like that it would be nice to maybe illustrate the progress that you've made in the report, if it's appropriate to do so, with some sort of real life examples, to sort of bring it to life a little bit, really, and show how it, the impact of the safeguarding partnership. So that would be something to bear in mind, really. Yeah, thanks very much.
We're happy to look at the full report when it comes in the autumn. So thank you. Thank you for all your work on that. Thank you. Okay, so we're going to move to agenda item 14 now. Just because for the other agenda items, we don't have any speakers, we've just got reports, and we're very mindful of how patient our public health officers have been, and thank you very much for your patience. So please, may we have your presentation on the Health and Wellbeing Board structure in Trafford and your Trafford Age Well plan, please.
Thank you. So I'm Helen Gollins. I'm representing Eleanor today. So Eleanor Rafe, Director of Public Health. She's had to go to present on clean air in Flixton. So I'm presenting around the Health and Wellbeing Board. So I'm Deputy Director of Public Health here in Trafford. And my colleague, Jane.
Hi, I'm Jane Wagstaff. I'm Project Officer for Public Health in Trafford.
So we're doing kind of a two-woman show today. So I'm going to talk briefly through the health and wellbeing structure, and then Jane's going to talk about the work that she's led on around the Age Well plan as well. So you'll have noted in the paper some brief details really about the Health and Wellbeing Board. So it's been in place since 2013, and its goal really is around partnership working to improve shared understanding of local needs, and that's through our joint strategic needs assessment, which I tend to mention in every meeting that I go to because it's my baby. But please do take time to look at it. It's really comprehensive. It's online. It's a fabulous resource for people who are working across Trafford. And also the other goal is around supporting the development of strategies to improve health and wellbeing in Trafford in a partnership way. The Health and Wellbeing Board has a strategic advisory role with two functions, which is one, to identify health outcomes to be commissioned, and two is to influence the wider determinants of health. So you'll see it's very partnership, obviously. So there's a number of different partners who sit on the board. This includes primary care, acute services, third sector organisations, and that list isn't exhaustive as well. So there's a long list of different members. From 2016 to 2019, we had 5 priorities, but the overarching objective is about reducing the inequality in Trafford of our healthy life expectancy. So I'm sure you'll all have seen the slide where there's a very, very steep line where we can see that people in our more deprived communities have less healthy life expectancy than those in our more affluent communities. And that's really the overarching objective of the Health and Wellbeing Board. It used to have 5 objectives, but for 2019 2025 these are changing. So they are reducing physical inactivity. So although Trafford has quite high rates compared to other areas of physically active people, we're still not active enough, and we really need to encourage those people who are physically inactive to become active. Tobacco control, we have a large inequality in Trafford around people who smoke, particularly in our routine and manual smoking in our groups there, and that does very much exacerbate our inequalities in health. Reducing harm from alcohol, reducing the impact of mental illness, improving diet and nutrition or healthy weight. So that's a big piece of work that we're starting on across all the 3 life course boards. Reducing the impact of poverty, tackling climate change, and clean air. So that's the new complete set of priorities for the Health and Wellbeing Board. So how they are kind of worked on is across a life course approach. So sitting underneath the Health and Wellbeing Board, there are 3 life course boards. So the first one is the Start Well Board, which I are the public health lead for, and it's now chaired by Councillor Hines, and that focuses on our 0 to 25. So it's predominantly our 0 to 19s, but up to 25s where there's a SEND issue. And we're looking at particularly school readiness, because again, that's a big inequality in Trafford. And Start Well Board has enabled us to really drive school readiness forward. We've got a number of different task groups running with lots of different initiatives that are place focus, and the Start Well Board feeding into Health and Wellbeing Board really gives it that really strong focus. Mental well-being and resilience of children and young people is another priority. Healthy weight and physical activity. So that's Start Well, which I'm very close to, so I can talk very confidently about that one. The next one is Live Well Board, and that's chaired by Councillor Slater. And the priorities there are around tobacco control, alcohol, cancer screening, again, poverty reduction. That's where our poverty impact work is sitting at the moment with our Life Course Board, and social prescribing. And that's led by, currently I'm caretaker manager for Live Well in terms of public health, but our new public health consultant, Donna Sager, who's joining us in August, will be taking the public health lead on that. And then the final Life Course Board is the Age Well Board, and that's led by Eleanor in terms of public health and is chaired by Councillor Harding. They've been doing an enormous amount of work, which fits very much in with the other agenda items that have been discussed this evening. But they focus on Age Well Trafford Plan, dementia strategy, falls and frailty, and end of life care. So that's the kind of the life course approach. What we recognise is that you can't look at sections of our population without seeing the life course flow into each other. So they do overlap, and we do work across topics as well to improve health and wellbeing. There are a number of other boards as well that sit within and underneath the Health and Wellbeing Board. One is the Mental Health Partnership. So they're starting a new piece of work looking at a mental health strategy. And there's a workshop which is taking place in July. And they're also the advocate for the suicide prevention strategy, which is due to be launched very soon. So that's all I have to say really around the Health and Wellbeing Board. So I'm going to hand over to Jane now around the Age Well plan.
Hi. I know the committee have already had the plan and the first update to the plan, so I thought I'd just run through how the plan was developed just briefly, and then if you've got any questions on what you've received already. So the plan was developed in response to Greater Manchester being named the first UK age-friendly city region back in March last year. Each of the 10 boroughs were required to develop their own individual plan based on their own populations. So we engaged with our residents starting at around August last year. We developed an online survey, which was also delivered in paper to leisure centres and libraries, and which is based on the World Health Organization's 8 domains of age friendliness. We receive, and we also distribute them through partners such as Age UK, Voice of BME, and places like that as well. To that, we received over 600 responses, which was we were very pleased with in the end. And that was broken down by locality as well. So into the east, west, north and central. And we also held drop-ins, face-to-face drop-ins in each locality, at least one in each locality. Once we'd analysed all that data, we looked at our local priorities and GM priorities and our engagement results, and identified 3 areas to focus on, which are to support our residents to live healthier lives for longer, to enable our residents to live in their homes and communities for as long as possible, and to empower older residents to have the economic and social opportunities that they want to have. From this, we developed a framework which mapped where we were at the time, what we wanted to achieve, what we needed to do that, and how we would measure the success of the plan over time. And the targets in the plan are medium to long term. Some of them very long term, and some of them we have very little control over, like transportation, Locally, we don't have much control over that, apart from maybe community transport programmes. But we feel that even with putting sections like that into the plan, really gives the residents a voice and shows what they want rather than what we want or what, so anyway, we submitted our plan to GMCA at the end of March, and then we submitted that to the UK Centre for Ageing Better as evidence to our commitment for embedding age-friendly practice into our policies. And then we were, through that and some extra evidence, we were named a UK age-friendly community by the UK Centre for Ageing Better in May. So that's really the journey of the Age Well plan so far. So if anybody has any questions, I'll be quite happy to try and answer them.
Any questions? Yeah, Councillor Axon, please.
Yeah, I'm just interested in reducing health inequalities. I've been sat in rooms like this for many, many years, and this subject has always come up about people who die, 10, 12 years earlier than those in other areas. And I'm not convinced that you can reduce the health inequalities between those people with wealth and those people who live in poverty. Now, I would love to be able to do it, and I've seen so many strategies to try to tackle it, but I've never seen it improve yet. And I just wonder if that that will ever happen. And that's probably a very unfair question to you, but and do you think that what you're planning here will actually reduce the gap between those that die older to those that die younger?
I can't really comment on the Age Well plan because I'm not that close to it, but I think the structure that we have in place in terms of the Start Well, Live Well, Age Well gives us a real focus on key issues in certain groups. So if we can get our children a good start in life and a healthy start in life, good education, and that then leads them on to a better standard of living.
I do actually know about that.
Yeah,
If they have a roof over their head, if
so
they
it's
can
very
work,
much,
if they've, have got the
targeting.
food on the table, all of those kind of things.
Yeah, so there's lots of different things that we can do to improve health inequalities. So, for example, cervical screening work, we've very much targeted certain communities, and we saw a huge increase in our cervical screening uptake in certain communities. So it is very much around focusing work. I think we're in a very difficult national context at the moment, and that's obviously playing out in Trafford as well in terms of impact on poverty. So there are lots of different initiatives going on, and public health, we always try to keep our eye on the long-term goal, and that's all we can do really, as long as it's evidence-based and we're looking at the needs of our population and we're working to reduce that inequality.
People are living longer, but that gap has never sort of reduced, and I think that is the issue really, how you actually reduce that gap, because particularly, as you rightly say, in the financial climate that we're in at this moment in time, I thought one of the best things that happened for many, many years was Sure Start and children's centres and working with the families in a very proactive way, and and giving the right kind of chances to those families and those children that live in that poverty. But obviously that all went. So.
I'd just say that I think in Trafford, it is around a system approach, and there's some fabulous early years work and early help work on health visiting. It's just about us all working together, and that's very much the process at the moment and the programme at the moment to address. And the GSNA and public health sits very much in the centre of the work of the long-term plan and the LCA. So there is a collective approach, I would say. I'm looking at my colleagues here for comment?
I think one of the things we're trying to do as well is to get that approach on neighbourhoods as well. So not see Trafford as a sort of one population group, but numerous neighbourhoods where deprivation and inequality is different, and actually communities are different, and trying to concentrate the joint needs assessment in that way, and also look at those needs with our wider multidisciplinary teams on the ground. So we're addressing inequalities and services in a much more targeted way than we have in the past. But obviously, you're absolutely right. In terms of sort of inequalities and reduction of inequalities, it's a much wider agenda than one particular team or one particular sector, and is about a whole system approach. And I wouldn't say we're there yet, but we're actually thinking much more widely than we had in the past in terms of how we link with other sectors and other partners, and actually start with communities rather than start with what we think is the answer.
Thank you. Councillor Taylor.
Thank you. Just a couple of questions. One, particularly the Live Well Board, one of its ambitions is poverty reduction. That's a huge, huge ambition, isn't it? And we all know that, it's a massive determinant of health, isn't it? And there's the Trafford poverty strategy. Where is that available to look at, and are you able to give us, just a briefest outline of what that entails?
So it's still under development at the moment.
Right.
We had a workshop that was led by Councillor Hines. I know Councillor Lloyd attended, and it was fascinating. So we brought different partners together to talk about poverty in Trafford. What was the view of poverty? And there's a lot of staff members present who had lived experience, and it was a wealth of information. So it's being led by Public Health, but it has a lot of partners who are involved, and Inclusive Growth Board is very much kind of working on it as well as the Communities and Partnerships team. So it's under development, and I know at the moment when we initially started it, I was thinking, oh my goodness, it's huge, but actually there are some tangible things that as a council and as a partnership we can do to support families and people living in Trafford who are affected by poverty. Very simple things. For example, our communities officer went out to the crematorium in Altrincham to talk about funeral poverty, which is a huge issue. There's lots of different things. So although it sounds like a huge area of work, it's going to be split into some this is what we need to do now, this is what we need to do in the long term. So school readiness, for example, fits nicely into a poverty strategy. So if our children do well at school, they're less likely to live in poverty as they get older. But then there are some very immediate kind of issues as well that the plan will also address. So it'll be in draft form in September, hoping to be signed off by the Health and Wellbeing Board in March. So it can always bring it along to the Health Scrutiny panel for review if you'd be interested.
I think that'd be really valuable to have that, definitely. And just sort of thank you for that. Just following on about the published plans for neighbourhoods, are they published, or again are they a work in progress at the moment? Sarah, just to refer to published plans for neighbourhoods, and you talked about sort of pace blade.
Yeah, we have plans that are at neighbourhood level, which we've been linking to general practice with the development of the GP network. So actually looking at the JSNAs at that local level. And what we want to do is work up those plans into neighbourhood plans in the future, but then being owned by much more of a multi-sector approach. So looking at, we'll have 5 primary care networks in our 4 neighbourhoods, and then how that links to Richard's services, how it links wider, but using the JSNA and the needs assessment as the starting point to that, really. So we're looking at that place-based model at the moment and working that up across partners. And we don't want it to be a sort of commissioning plan. No. We want it to be owned by the people on the ground in terms of the system and delivery. So there's parts of it already available, but not the finished product, because we want to work with the networks and with the with Richard's staff in building that up.
Is that something that we maybe as elected members could be involved with? Because obviously I do represent the ward where deprivation is a huge issue.
I think one of the things that maybe we can talk about is how to get more involved from the members as well, so that we can actually produce something which is much more owned and valuable to the wider community as well. So that'd be great.
I think we know our own communities. We know people within those communities who could be really helpful in influencing and shaping those plans. Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Final questions for our officers. Okay, Councillor Hartley.
I have a few questions that are quite specific, so if you can't answer, then let me know. So one was about the Start Well plan, and particularly school readiness, and we've talked about Councillor Acton obviously mentioned inequalities and poverty. One of the big issues that I think can affect school readiness certainly in the north of the borough is communication skills and speech and language. So the primary schools in the north of the borough where 2/3 of the children speak English as an additional language. So I wondered if that's part of the school readiness plan, because that would have a big impact, I think, certainly in the north of the borough.
So yes, so that's quite an interesting element of school readiness. So particularly in the north, so we've got place-based plans. One is focused on Partington, and the other one is focused predominantly on the Clifford ward in the north, but in the north in general. And what you do see with children where English isn't their first language is they may not be school ready, but that first year of school they excel and they actually overtake the children who have English as a first language who weren't school ready, and they fly basically. So for us, we've kind of, that's not because the evidence is there that once they're in education, it's fine. And it's a whole kind of, we've looked at the whole cultural issues around kind of support from extended families and kind of approach to children going into nursery settings from certain cultural groups as well. So our health visitors are supporting families in that way, but it's more our white British boys, which is a real kind of where we need to focus the improvement. But in terms of communication and a different level as well, the Welcome programme is being rolled out across Trafford, and all our nursery settings are, I think at the last count in March, about 90% of our nursery settings had been trained. So that's where staff who aren't our health visitors traditionally do kind of an assessment around speech and language, and where there is a flag or a concern, they get referred through into the appropriate pathways to support the children. So speech and language is very much prioritised in terms of getting children, supporting families to be school ready. And we're also looking at things like chatterbox and communication in the home as well, because the more words that children hear, it just supports them to be school ready.
Thank you very much indeed for your report and your presentation, and to say that we note the information you provided. Thank you very much. Thank you. Yes, of course. Yeah, of course. Thank you very much indeed for coming this evening, for your input. Thank you. Thank you. Goodbye. Good night. Okay, so just going back to the reports that we may have missed out. So yes, agenda item number 12 is the North West Ambulance Services annual performance statistics. Obviously, we don't have anybody here today. If you do have any questions, because of the shortage of time, would it be possible to email Fabiola with them rather than us taking them now? So if you have any questions to the service, email Fabiola. And the question was also posed that we note the content of the report. There's also the question raised, would we like somebody to be present at the next report? I think that would be helpful. But committee, when would you like to receive the next report?
Well, I was going to say, I thought the North West Ambulance report was quite succinct, but also that's showing, the Zara, is it, who's working and trying to deflect the insurance from going. Yeah, and I just thought it was that it's worth noting that seems to have had some success.
That is a really
yes, it was. It was actually mentioned in the previous report, wasn't it, as well? I think it was raised as a way of keeping people in the home as well. So it's fantastic. I just think
it's just worth noting and just commending, really. Okay. But actually, the North West Ambulance, is anybody else doing the monitoring of it? Because I think other areas do it, because I know, for example, when they weren't performing in Trafford, the CCG were looking at the ambulance response time, and actually did some work with it. So the only thing is that what I'm saying is that I don't really want to do anything that somebody else might be doing. And it's just really whether we could get all those reports together and just show that actually it's been monitored. So, you want
I was going to say, I presume, I mean, the CCG will do a report on them, won't they? I would.
They get the same reports as we do. All I'm saying is, what I would like it to do, not to do, is repeat work that's already been done.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I do agree with you about Sarah, the community paramedic. I think it's made a massive difference. Yeah.
Just one person as well that sort of made such an impact is very impressive, isn't it? So yes, okay. So if we could perhaps note that. But any questions about the report itself, please?
Yeah. So more of that kind of service then. You can see already. I mean, I know because she's based sort of kind of in the north of the borough, and I've met her on a lot of occasions, but she's particularly sort of focused in the north of the borough. She works with the Trafford One Partnership and things like that. So it's made a massive difference.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you very much for that. And so moving on to agenda item 15, which was the Health Watch report, end of year performance and impact report 2018-19. Unfortunately, we couldn't have anyone from Health Watch here this evening. Are there any comments members would like to make briefly about the report? Councillor Taylor.
I was going to say, similar to the comment that Judith just made about, avoidance of duplication, because they have their own sort of programme of work. And I think we said we'd go and speak with Heather, didn't we?
Yes,
and sort of look about, I mean, this is obviously last year's work, isn't it? And it'd be useful to sort of just be clear about where they intend to go in the next 12 months, wouldn't it? So we can avoid duplication of any work that they do, and maybe perhaps bring things to their, does it say their plan of work for, there's a bit at the back, isn't there, about their plan of work for next year. So, I think we need to be mindful of that to ensure that we don't duplicate that within our work planning as well.
Yes. Any other comments? If you have any questions, perhaps because of shortage of time this evening, if you have any questions from Health Watch themselves, perhaps if you could email them to Fabiola by the end of the week, is that enough? Yeah, so by maybe Monday. Is that okay? So thank you very much indeed. So okay, so moving on. So just so the committee obviously notes that report, but moving on to our final agenda item, Health Scrutiny Work Programme. Obviously the work programme that we've got in our packs was really kind of transferred on from the previous committee, and obviously it's really just a transitional paper really. And I think perhaps at this point of the meeting we would like to perhaps close our formal meeting by saying that we will be looking to develop that plan and our own plan separately, and if we can close the meeting now, that would be good. Yeah.
It's just about the date of the next meeting.
Oh yes, sorry. Oh yes, sorry. Yeah, thank you. Yes. Yeah, we are, but we just don't need to discuss it at this particular moment. We will discuss it later if that's okay. And yeah, so I forgot my fault to mention that the next meeting is an extraordinary meeting of Health Scrutiny Committee. If you recall, it's to discuss the Altrincham Hub. It will be actually at the Hub on the 24th of June, starting at 6:30 p.m. Okay. July, sorry. Oh gosh.
Could I give my apologies? I won't be in the country.
Okay, of course. Thank you very much for informing us. So with that, any other comments, any questions just before I close the meeting officially? Any questions? No. Well, thank you very much for attending and all your contributions. And with that, and thank you to Fabiola for supporting us, and close the meeting. Thank you.